Welcome to Audience First, a podcast for tech marketers looking to break out of the echo chamber to better understand their audience and turn them into loyal customers. Every week, Dani Woolf has brutally honest conversations with busy tech buyers about what really motivates them, the things they hate that vendors do, and what you can do about it. Get access to practical information on how to build authentic relationships with your audience. Listen to and talk with your buyers, and apply real customer insights to your strategies and tactics. You owe it to the world to unmute your mic. Are you ready?
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show. And today we have a very special presentation. I got to tell you a quick story about my life. I remember I was at the United States Cyber Command and I was doing what we were basically calling threat intelligence. And then something special happened. The APT1 report came out and it just broke open the floodgates when it came to threat intelligence. And then everyone wanted it. But what happens when there's a lot of desire? There's a lot of people that want to capitalize on that desire. And so people are using threat intelligence here and there and everywhere, trying to sell solutions and services. But a lot of folks didn't really know how to do threat intelligence. And so I spent a lot of time bringing a lot of that back into the place in which it originated, right? Intelligence is all about bringing that context. But so many people, so many organizations abuse that word threat intelligence that I had to then fix everything. And that's what happens a lot in cybersecurity. All these terms, these buzzwords, people are leveraging it to earn money, to sell their solutions and their services. So today we brought on two very special people who did some incredible research on buzzwords, marketing, and sales. And how do you do it the right way? Obviously, we want to be able to communicate to the folks that we're talking to, but we don't want to just use buzzwords to trick people into having a conversation with us. So up first, I want to bring to the stage Dani Woolf. She is the CEO and founder of Audience First, and she is one of the most data-centric marketers that I know. Dani, welcome to the stream.
Thank you so much for having me. That was an awesome intro, first of all, and really, really glad to be here.
Absolutely. And we brought on your partner in crime, George Kamide. He is a tech strategist and the host of the Bare Knuckles Brass Tacks podcast. Welcome to the show, George.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So I got to look at the report. I'm sure a lot of people have read the report at this point, but we got to take it back to the origin. That we talk about this hype trap that people get stuck in. When people found out about threat intelligence and how much people wanted it, people started to leverage it. Same with AI, same with zero trust. Where does this hype sort of come from when these buzzwords come about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes from, frankly, from experience. It comes from the stress that we have as marketers and salespeople to sell, right? We
Word.
create this hype cycle, we get trapped in it, and we don't realize that it's causing a disservice to our buyers and it's causing a disservice to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get,
What?
sucked into that vicious cycle, and it's hard to get out of there once you get trapped in there.
Yeah, for sure. There's a cultural inertia also. So, like, if you're working in smaller startups, you're trying to latch onto a category and you see the bigger players, the publicly traded companies using those terms, and you're kind of trying to ride those. And also, like, when you're trying to differentiate your product, you're in it, you're in the trenches, you're with the features. And it can be really easy to just get enamored with that kind of messaging and not think
Mm-hmm.
about, like, okay, well, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because you're trying to dot the I's, cross the T's, and make sure you're aligned with where you think your category is. So I think it's easy to dunk on buzzwords, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy to fall into it, and it's really hard to see that inertia and pull yourself out of the stream.
Absolutely. Before we bring up some of the reports so you can walk us through some of your findings, where did this come from? Where did this inspiration to really, because I know you've done this for a while, Dani, going to the different trade shows, seeing what people are doing, like and then how did you two bring this together as a co-research thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, this was inspired by Joseph Carson over at Delinea, who was on my podcast about a year and a half, I think almost 2 years ago, and he said that, yeah, when I go to conferences, How do I evaluate vendors? I basically have a buzzword bingo card, and I
Hmm.
thought that was really cool. I was like, I didn't
Right.
hear that ever before. I didn't know that folks actually did that, and so I told myself, okay, well, what if I put myself in his shoes? Let me put myself in the shoes of the buyer. And I was at Black Hat last year. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go through this, and then, from the lens of the marketer, it was a completely different experience. I wasn't evaluating solutions. I was looking at how were vendors presenting their solutions, what kinds of messages were they using, what kind of campaigns were they trying to promote at the event physically, and I saw a lot of flaws there. I saw a lot of disconnect between what buyers were telling me on the podcast, vendors were actually saying, and actually how they were behaving at events. And I was like, okay, I need to create a mini report. The first mini report to actually kind of show those gaps was at Black Hat last year. And then I said, okay, I need to do this like full scale, like I have to get the whole floor. I really wanted to get the
Mm.
whole floor. And I was like, I can't do this alone. RSA is way too big for me to snap photos and manually like process all the data. I was like, okay, let's talk to a partner in crime. George and George have their podcast, which is very aligned to what I'm doing as well. And I was like, it just fit naturally. I asked him if he wanted to help me out, capture all the data, and then create a report, kind of distill all that insight. And he's been instrumental in taking it next level. We also, surveyed buyers as well to actually get more
Hmm.
data from the floor, right? And show that gap. And I'll let George add some color there too.
Yeah, I mean, I read Danny's Black Hat report and was really into it. And I thought from our conversations on Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks, which, so we alternate talking to salespeople and CISOs, I was like, well,
Hmm.
we need that other point of view, and we got to correlate, like, what, because I think in the industry, it's felt like the last 2 years, there's just growing divergence, like the hype train is accelerating in one direction and the sort of buyer fatigue is going in a different direction. And I mean, that frankly doesn't make us any safer. And also, Danny and I have been on the vendor side. It doesn't help us sell any better. So,
Hmm.
yeah, we just wanted to really, really explore that gap.
Yeah, let's bring up the report now because what I'm seeing is it's almost like a conference paradox. It seems like
Mhm.
everyone wants to be different and stand out, but in doing that, sometimes we end up sounding very similar. And so let's go through some of the major key findings of your report.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah. So we actually were able to capture data from 353 booths. We thought we got all 600 plus, but it was actually 353, which was a good sample size, 57% of the expo floor. And we saw that the top 10 most used buzzwords were data, cloud, protect, obviously AI, cyber, in and of itself, threat, zero or zero trust, automated API invisibility. And we actually got some, I wouldn't say pushback, but some folks saying, well, I mean, data and cloud's not really a buzzword, but in
Right.
fact, we actually thought the use of cloud and data in the context of some of the primary and secondary messages lacked clarity and context, and so that's
Right.
why we marked it as a buzzword. And actually, in fact, I've been on some panels with some CISOs who actually said because of the ever changing field of cloud security, for example, they get confused as to what some of the cloud security
Mhm.
terms are or what cloud security actually means. And so that's what we meant by using words like data and cloud, for example.
And so what would be a scenario in which someone uses cyber as just a buzzword, but not really adding any context to the message itself?
George, you want to take that?
Yeah. So when you think about the context and you think about, and which we'll get into what people are trying to solve for, if you just throw out these words, and usually they're with some sort of like maximalist messaging, like, and that's in the report too.
Hmm.
You'll see things like all cyber risks solved, or
Right.
prevent the unpreventable, or and it's like that is really good for the 3 second span as you're scanning the RSA floor,
Hmm.
but ultimately it's sort of vacuous. It doesn't really mean anything. And so there's a lot of use for cloud data and cyber in that, because they're just kind of slapping it into these things that don't contextualize what it is you're doing for like a business outcome.
Right.
Yeah. So in the 353 booths that we scanned, we saw that 81% of them used at least one buzzword. So that was pretty jarring for us. I mean, what would we have seen if we have captured all of the booths, right?
Yeah.
9% of those vendors used 4 or more, with 13% using 5 or more, right? So it's quite jarring. When you look at some of the examples, which are later in this deck, you'll understand why we pointed out some of these examples as being jarring. So it was an interesting insight for us, for sure.
Did you see an example of a vendor that utilized no buzzwords whatsoever? Every word had its placement, every word had context and meaning behind it. Were there any standouts? And you don't necessarily have to name names, but you can talk about how they architected their messaging, how they architected their booth in order to say, hey, this is as authentically us as we can be without trying to ride the coattails of some of these buzzwords.
Yeah, I'll call out a few a little bit later when we talk about booth builds, but because they did a good job and it's really a concrete example. But it actually seems to serve your function better, and maybe this is true for the larger vendors who are more established. If you really just have your name, front and center, and you're not trying to use what we called the primary messaging, which was like basically the biggest font on the banner or whatever, and then the secondary messaging. When you leave it as like, here's the logo, here's what we do, and then as you get closer to the booth or the demo station, then they've got like some readouts of feature sets or something that draws you into that booth, and then you can begin to contextualize that. But I think it's hard, and that's the trap. One of the traps is you have very limited real estate and you're trying to like haiku a very technical solution, and you end up just trying to rely on these words to do a lot of work for you, like AI ML. And I can talk a little bit about why I think that's like totally useless at this point. But you throw it in there because you're like, what? I mean, I don't know how to explain advanced machine learning algorithm in the space that I have, right? And so that's the reaction that you get. So sometimes just less is more.
Yeah, and I think if anything, there's not one specific vendor that I recall, but I remember just um, folks or vendors who used clear and concise messaging, just say what it is. But that paired with also good booth activity or booth supplemental booth explanations at the booth, good clear demos, nothing complex, high level enough to understand from far and also from close by. So that paired, the message paired with the activity and paired with the experience really stood out to me as most effective. And I know we'll dig into that a little bit later.
Great. Yeah, let's keep going.
George, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think this was surprising. I think given the snide remarks leading up to RSA all over LinkedIn and people complaining about invitations that they're getting, I think it would be easy to think that most security buyers just don't even hit the floor. I expected I expected these to be inverted, basically, these stats. But, we saw a fair number say like, yeah, I hit the floor, but I sort of walk it quickly. And then some, a full third were like, no, I walk it really extensively. Like they're genuinely interested to learn more. And I think that means there's a real opportunity. And I want to be very clear-eyed about this, right? Like sponsorships are expensive, and they are expensive for a reason, because they help pay for the conference, which is why people go to it. So I think for the amount of investment that marketing makes into these events, I don't know that the return is necessarily there for the vendors as it is for people who go and they get the thought leadership and they attend workshops and they attend sessions and they get a lot out of the conference. So I think I want to be very clear. What Dani and I are trying to do here is not dunk on marketers, but try to look at it very critically so that more people can kind of step out, be bold, and really, at the end of the day, get more return for these significant investments.
What
Yeah.
would increase that number, that 66% up to closer to 100%? What might entice buyers to want to walk the expo floor more?
Oh,
Yeah. Where do we start?
yeah.
Again, a lot of this is in the report, but just to highlight some of the feedback, it's just stop being so pushy and salesy on the floor. Understand who I am, or treat me like a human, really,
Mhm.
and not a scan, badge scan. Um, Provide, thoughtful experiences in that I can take insight back to my job, right? Teach me something I didn't know, or if I knew it, just, be clear as to what you're trying to explain. Um, there was a great piece of insight that we found in the report was that it's hard for people to communicate on the floor. Like there's
Yeah.
high noise, like you can't
Right.
even hear anything. And like, how do we actually have a conversation? And so maybe creating, experiences that allow people to lower the noise level and have thoughtful conversations can really up the number of buyers actually coming to walk the expo floor. Because I know based on my experience back at Black Hat when I did the buzzword analysis and messaging analysis, a lot of the buyers loved going to Innovation City, loved taking a look at the new tech coming out, but it's just so hard to, consume information there because it's so loud and it's so,
Mhm.
but hustling and bustling over there. So what can we do to alter that experience for a better user experience at the conference?
Yeah, Chris, your question is essentially the central purpose of the entire report, which
Yeah.
so I think it draws in not just the messaging, but it's like once you get there, as Dani said, what is that experience? And yeah, that was one of the surprising things is that when we did our survey, security buyers reported like they wanted to have really in-depth discussions, which I think on the marketing side, we think, oh, we have to capture their attention in 30 seconds because they're just like running by. How do I trap them and keep them here long enough to like want a demo?
Right.
So that's sort of like working at cross purposes. So to improve that, I think it really requires like a cultural sea change in how we approach these events. And we'll get into this, I think, a little bit later because I don't want to give it all away here. But
Of course.
I think it's not just the messaging. It's kind of the whole booth training, the way you rotate your teams through the booth, the way you approach people. It's the whole shebang.
And I like what you're both are saying about building a relationship because I mean, really, that's what business is. It's a relationship. Whether you look at it that way or not, you want to do business with people that you like, right? I mean, of course, there might be an edge case where the solution is just too good. I don't care who I'm working with. I need the solution. But you tend to find that those relationships that are built, whether you're at a conference, whether you start with social media, those are really where business starts to transact for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I'll take a 1 second. I mean, I see some comments here. Yes, teams are incentivized to get as many scans as possible, and I can talk about that too a little bit later when we talk about booth strategies. But marketers need and should be allowed to be choosier. And I remember Dani and I going around and talking. I said, I am not your ICP. I tried to speak in the direct language. I was like, I am
Yeah.
just here doing this study. And they were like, can I scan your badge? I was like, I'm not going to answer your email. I'm not a buyer. I am a waste of your time. These are like
Right.
words I told them. And they were like, I still got to scan your badge.
Wow.
And I think what was really, I don't want to say depressing, but it was disheartening was, I asked people, it was like, so what are you looking like? This was the last day. It was like, what do you think you're going to get out of this event? And they're like, honestly, probably nothing. And I was like, what? You're spending like at a minimum 50 grand for the 10 by 12 booth in the center aisle, to say nothing of the big booth builds that run into 6 to 7 figures. And I was like, so, and he's like, yeah, I'd have to scan you. Like my CMO is going to tell me I got to scan you. And I was like, okay, here you go.
Yeah.
Unsubscribe. So
Yeah. To me, the most, jarring was I was just walking by and some guy comes out of nowhere and he goes, "Do you have any questions?" I'm just like, "Well, I was just walking by. Like, I don't know. My name is Dani. What's your name?
Yeah.
Do you have any
Right.
questions?" I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what? see you later, man. It
Yeah.
was just like, come on, there's a way to treat people. There's a way to build relationships. If anything, this is a great opportunity to get to know folks, and see what they're about. We understand the need to get those booth scans, but yes, Charity said it right. We go for quality scans, not quantity. So
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah, I talk about these relationships and social neuroscience. There's four real relationships between people. There's altruistic, where you're giving more than you're receiving. There is selfish, where I'm going to take and you're going to lose. There is spiteful, which we both lose. And then ultimately, you want to be mutually beneficial to each other. And that's what I talk about when I'm coaching marketers or I'm coaching people, sales folks, because you want to have that mutually beneficial relationship. If you have something that people need, you need to also understand what their problems are. If you're like, hey, you need this. Yeah, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you do. I don't know what your company does, but you need our solution. That's definitely the wrong way to take it. So building that relationship from a mutual beneficial perspective, I think, is going to be key for anybody on a demo floor.
yeah.
For sure.
And this was an interesting insight. Obviously, I didn't expect anything else apart from that 8. I don't know who said that they think that buzzwords are very helpful, but maybe that wasn't unclear. Somebody wasn't clear there. But
Right.
I mean, average score was 1.8, right?
Mm-hmm.
Folks find it painfully annoying, and not helpful in their search for new solutions, right? And especially now's the time to make that shift. we're
Yeah.
we're in Q3, people are looking for new solutions for 2024, and so this is a good opportunity to take some of this data and maybe flip your strategies and tactics on their head if they're not working. So
For sure.
all
This
right.
is it.
Yeah.
This is the juice.
This is the
So
juice. Yeah.
we talked about getting trapped in the buzzwords because you're stuck in the feature set. Product team
Mhm.
is really excited. We just came out with this thing. We're going to make a big announcement at RSA. Cool. And like hype train and you train the booth staff. Like this is the thing to say, right? And then you look at this graph and it's like, what do they want to know? What is the business outcome? Can you tell me illustrative stories about, if I'm in financial services, do you have financial services? So I could kind of like benchmark, how I'm going against my peers. Do you have industry benchmarks? I mean, this is information that informs budgets. It informs how people buy and why and prioritization. And then that tiny sliver is the specs and the features. Because if you think about that customer journey, I just need to learn, I got this laundry list in my head of priority items I need to fix or address in my organization. Do you map to that? Okay, yes, maybe no. Or then after you get that relationship, they're like, okay, now I need to know how it works, and ideally that's the conversation that's coming after RSA or Black Hat, like after you've built that relationship. And so, I think the way we train teams is usually almost the inverse of this, where it's just like come out of the gate with the features and make sure it stands out against the person next door or whoever other competitor is going to be there on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of akin this to, I mean, if you were to take soda, for example, if Coca-Cola, instead of saying, hey, we're going to quench your thirst and have a good time doing it while it tastes great, versus, hey, we have 8.10 or 8 out of 10 on the carbonation scale. We're a brown liquid that uses sugar, and here's some of the ingredients. That would be hard to entice people to buy Coca-Cola, right? But no, they show the story, right? What is the outcome in which you achieve through buying this product? If they just listed the attributes of the soda, I think it'd be less thirst quenching, at least from a from a buyer's perspective. Where does cybersecurity go wrong when we're you're pushing these features first? Why do we push the features first? And what do we think is going to happen when we're pushing features versus pushing the story or the business outcome?
Yeah, well, there's significant resource, in any company devoted to R&D and product development, right? So the company, it's a logical fallacy. I mean, we feel like we've invested all this time, and so if we don't talk about these new features, like what was all of that for? What were those sprints
Mhm.
for? What was all the QA for? when really we can internalize that on the vendor side, but we really need to always be mapping it to like, what is the outcome that it helps a buyer achieve, right? Is it a faster time to detection? Does it, and like, what do they get out of that? Oh, well, they can save time, they can reallocate SOC resources instead of triage. I don't know. You have to really do that customer research. You have to talk to your existing customers. And I think it's just easy because we're tech forward, because we're in the tech and we're not sitting where Dani frequently sits, which is on the side of the customer. And like, why did they buy the tech in the first place? Because, and I guess now's the time. So the reason I think AI ML is so banal now, even though everyone wants to bolt it on or talk about it, is because if you talk to most CISOs, machine learning is like table stakes. There's like first of all, it's been around for at least 20 years in technology applications, and there's literally no way to process the amount of data in any system that a cyber vendor is going to touch, whether it's network or SaaS applications, without machine learning. So I think most people are like, well, duh, you have machine learning. So then like, how are you going to differentiate yourself against another competitor who obviously has machine learning, right?
Oh, this is one of my favorite slides.
Yeah, walk us through it.
I always love a good example. And I'm sorry to anybody who we're calling out here. We didn't call out vendor names, but if this is your top line message at the event, I'm sorry. But it stood out because, in the 60 plus interviews I've had with cybersecurity buyers, two things, irk them: lack of context and using absolute terms and over promises, right? Again, be clear about what you do. And I understand that there's a need to be kind of witty with your message at events to maybe lure some folks in. That's fine, but you have to back it up, right? With a good explanation, with context, with folks that know what they're talking about, and it doesn't matter who they're working for within the departments, right? Marketing, sales, customer success, sales engineers, whatever. They got to be well versed as to what they do, why they do, how they do it, right? And what we saw in some of these examples, when asking, okay, well, what does this mean, right? Folks in the booth didn't know how to explain what it means. I go, no, I don't want to see your tool. Just tell me in like a few sentences what it is that you do. No, come take a look at my tool, but I don't have time to take a look at your tool, and I don't want to look at your tool. So, these taglines or messages that were used really stood out to us as some examples that I think could have been, done better and backed up better, right? When actually coming up to ask, okay, well, what does this mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, literally, like, what does pre-zero mean? We already know that zero trust is like the most hated term, and then we're gonna double down, and we are like Minority Report style tech that like attacks your adversaries. I don't know. I don't even know what it means. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. And that vendor spent a lot of money marketing all over the city.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing that was written. And I've looked for that vendor, and I went to their booth, and it was the only thing that was written on their booth. And then when I went up to ask, what does it mean? The marketing gal couldn't tell me what they do. Wow. And that was a missed opportunity. They spent a lot of money.
That's
I know they
so
did.
much money.
Yeah.
Let's just set it on fire.
That was on the streets. That was, throughout the floor. So
yeah, I'd love to see you all do either a post or even a video where you take some of these messages, and maybe you could change the words around a little bit to, not really call out exactly who it is, but then deconstruct it and rebuild it in a way that you think would resonate better for everybody. I think that'd be a pretty cool thing to see.
Yeah. I'm all about that. And just going back to that slide, I remember specifically walking through the floor with Chris Roberts, and him literally cringing, reading "Human Error Conquered." That really ticked him off. I know who that vendor
aggressive.
It is pretty aggressive.
And and so this actually does trigger folks who are looking at, who are actually evaluating tools on the floor. So that was really alarming to me while walking with some buyers. All right.
Look at that. Network opportunities, right? It's all about connection. It's all about
Mhm.
building that relationship. But yeah, walk us through what were some of your takeaways from this slide?
Yeah, I mean, people go to conferences to extend their professional development, whether that's learning new things or meeting new people. You know, it could be mentors, it could be executive sponsors, it could just be peers. Maybe you work remotely and you don't have a local community that's really strong. I was surprised that even in the offsite things, like people listed panel discussions, and I was like, y'all are boring. But they they really did want to learn. I mean, they're being paid by their company to go, and they really have to show something when they come back. They can't be like, I got a whole bunch of swag for my kids. Thanks for
Right.
spending the airfare. And so I don't know that you have to overthink it, but like a good example of what I saw was some of the bigger booths had either their evangelists or their chief security officers or their innovation officers. They had predetermined speaking spots. So one, it's a lure to the booth, but also it was like a chance to actually learn firsthand from some of the people. And then, you could shake hands afterwards and meet them. I mean, I see Charity writes on, I got to meet her. I specifically went to the Recorded Future booth because I knew she was speaking. And I think that's a really great way to draw people in and like begin to build those relationships.
Absolutely. Actually, for Huntress, John Hammond and I, we're going to be doing something very similar at the Huntress booth this year at Black Hat. So we're looking forward to meeting a bunch of folks there. But I mean, honestly, and I hope I'm not putting the cart before the horse in terms of this session, but it almost seems like rather than trying to convey all of your features and your functions and your product, it almost seems like the focus should be building those relationships. Bring people to the booth to have a conversation, learn more, even leverage it as market research. Really have a conversation with
Yes.
the people that you're talking to, ask them questions about them, try to figure out their pain points, and put that in your back pocket. Even if you got
Yep.
0 leads, but you're able to talk to 200 people and understand their problems more, you couldn't do better than that. People pay thousands of dollars for those type of surveys. So if you could almost do like a 2-for-1 type of deal when you're doing this stuff, I think
Yeah.
that would
Yeah.
be
You bring up a really great point, and I think when you talk about those booth strategies, you can approach it with that intentionality. If you're a giant company that's got the huge booth and multiple demo screens, I mean, that's one thing. You're there to try and gin up business. Whereas if you're the startups and the 10 by 10s or the 10 by 12s and you don't have a lot of room, I mean, that is, yeah, I mean, if you're especially a remote first startup, like that is incredible market research, and you have to approach it with that mindset. I also think you should, if we get away from the MQLs and the scans, if you can also teach your teams to just qualify out fast. Like, hey, if it's
Mhm.
a student or a consultant, it's like, hey, cool, thanks for coming by. This is what we do. And like teach them how to get out of that conversation faster. You don't need to scan them. It's not worth your time. They're there
right.
for the t-shirt, get the t-shirt, move on, like, and really have targeted discussions.
Yes, let's talk a little bit about this building of this relationship with folks. Speaking from a place of authenticity, not
Mhm.
trying to leverage those buzzwords. Can folks start to do or think about as they go into places like Black Hat, as they start to construct their booths? Obviously, some things are probably in flight
Mhm.
already, so they can't change too much at this point. But what should people start to think about when it comes to being authentic, speaking in normal terms for people to understand, but also how do you build that relationship with the community?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I always say this to folks. If you're not genuinely curious, you're gonna have a hard time building an authentic relationship.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you have to want to get to know a person. And then that's gonna lead you to kind of digging into the right questions to ask folks, and which will open the door for you, right? I always say lead with some vulnerability. I always want to know more, right? Because of that curiosity. And so I go in asking for feedback. How can I learn more? What can I do better? I want to collaborate with folks too. And so, hey, can you give me a little bit of time to hear what I'm about, and give me feedback on how I can improve. And that always works for me because, again, I'm leading with some vulnerability. I'm being true and honest about what my intentions are. I'm not trying to sell. And so, and saying that, I literally want to get to know you better. And that, fortunately has allowed me to build a business, right? Getting to know
Right.
people better. Um, and believe it or not, folks in the security industry, buyers, practitioners, they do want to help. They do want to share their experiences because they need help themselves. And so when you're leading with that, I think it's a nice card to use long term.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think operationally and tactically, Chris, this comes down to how you've designed it, right? So if you've designed the booth to be a scan machine, it's going to be a scan machine, right?
Mm.
Right.
If you have trained your team, and there are people who do this on active listening instead of maybe objection handling, then it means you've approached the conversation with like, how am I going to learn from everyone who steps in front of me? When you do the objection handling, you've sort of taught people, you've primed the pump that everyone's in there to buy something, right? So like,
Right.
if they say this thing, you got to go here because assume they want to buy. I don't know that that's a safe assumption. And so tactically, it also means how are you rotating your teams? I think somebody commented here, most of those people, it gets hard because after day one, you're just like blasted, right? You've talked to like 200 people. And so if you only have 2 or 3 people there, you are really not capitalizing on the human energy that you have in the booth. And it's a finite resource. And so I've seen success where you can rotate those teams faster so that the team that was in the booth, and let's say they had like 10 substantive conversations, they can put their heads together at a table and be like, okay, I talked to this person about this. They told me to reach back out in the second quarter. You need those notes. I don't know how many people on this know, but like in the badge scanner, you can put those kinds of notes. I've gone through a lead file of like 300 and whatever scans. And if there's no notes, I mean,
Right. They're all the same.
and then you treat them all the same, right? And then you think, well, it's okay. I have all these automated tools. I'll drop them into this post RSA sequence. I'll give them to the BDRs. I think at that stage, automation is approaching a kind of techno chauvinism where you just assume that the technology is the answer to the problem. The human interaction that you had in the booth is a human problem. And so the person who took those notes needs to be able to either own that follow-up or really communicate with the seller whose territory it is and be like, look, I talked to him about this thing. I talked to her about this feature, but she said, I'm interested, but don't reach out till Q2. Like you have to have that level. And yeah, sure, you're going to have some scans where you can dump them in an automation, I guess. But like the really high quality stuff, like why just sort of like toss it into the chipper with the rest, right? But that it's really about that booth training, how you're cycling those teams, how you're building those booths. I'm going on, but one point on the booth build is if it's super like open office plan and you got all like lights and screens, that's where it gets really hard to hear people, right? I was standing next to one booth that had a screen and the guy was trying to talk to me, and the other booth was screaming about some sweepstakes, and I was like, I have no idea what you're saying.
It was the motorcycle, I think.
It was the motorcycle for sure, right there at the bottom of the escalator. But I wanted to give the shout out to Red Canary and Recorded Future. I thought they did a really good job. They had the booth design to draw in, hear some threat intelligence, but then they actually had like a roof and the screens, and that roof really did block out a lot of noise. You could walk through, you could have substantive questions about whatever you were seeing, and I thought that kind of was good in terms of it went against the grain in terms of like big lights and sound and stuff.
Right. Yeah. I want to definitely get to a couple more points, but folks, if you have questions for George or Dani, feel free to drop them wherever you're watching this, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. One of the things I think about as you guys started to share this research with folks, I'm sure there were a lot of hard truths that people had to face. I'm sure whenever you get that ouch feeling, honestly, sometimes that's growth, right? Because we feel like, ooh, that's a mistake that I made. I leveraged this buzzword, or I used this tactic, but I want to do better next time. Did you have conversations with folks that were like, oof, that kind of hurts me right in the heart there?
Sadly, no, to be honest. Not enough, in my opinion. I feel like those who downloaded realized, yes, like this is a big smack in the face. And I think those folks are kind of dealing with this information and processing it on their own. I got, like I personally got some some on the buyer side saying, well done, this is really good. Some on the vendor side saying, this is, this is excellent information, thank you. Um, but I, the pessimist in me, because I'm a little bit of a pessimist, is wondering, will this help? Like, will this
Mm,
change? Will this kind of break the status quo? My hope is yes. My hope is going to change 1%. I think 1% is a lot in this industry.
Mhm.
And I think, we riffed on this a little bit, before our call, when we were prepping for this. I hope this will change. I don't know if it will. I hope things will change. But not enough have reached out to me and say, yeah, okay, I really need to change the way things are done. And I think it's because, a lot of the folks who are charged with, spinning up these events are, have their backs against the wall, right?
Yeah.
mhm.
It's hard, again, some buyers are telling me, if you don't show at the event, if you don't expo, you don't exist. I mean, that's a hard truth to
Right.
swallow,
Hmm.
right? You have some really good technologies out there, some startups out there that can't afford to do things at the expo. So
Right.
it's we're in a really tough spot, and I don't know if I have the answers, if this is the answer, but again, my hope is some are listening and changing things up and flipping it. What do you think, George?
Yeah, that again, it's that cultural inertia. I mean, we can sit here and you probably have a team and you're like, this is great. This is our plan going forward. And then you get to Black Hat and you look over your shoulder and people are doing the other thing and you feel that, that peer pressure to go back in that direction. I would say if you find the approach interesting enough or you've had these discussions internally, like you're tearing your hair out because it's like, oh yeah, we didn't really get a lot out of RSA. I don't know how to show. I mean, marketing is all about testing. So maybe you don't want to go out on a limb for Black Hat, or Chris, as you said, it's already been built. But a lot of these companies do local conferences, regional stuff. And there's an opportunity to start, let's develop a different strategies, like A/B test the booth strategy, even the messaging, if you want to do a different kind of stand-up banner. And just fortune favors the bold. If
Yeah.
everyone is doing the exact same thing and you are a small Series A, Series B startup, and you think you can just blueprint what CrowdStrike and SentinelOne and these big publicly traded companies are doing, I don't know why you think you can win competing at their budget. Like that is a losing proposition to me. And I think you really have to like outthink that and really engage. So you got to think
Here's what
really
I think would
critically.
be here's what I think would be an excellent study. It'd be awesome if there were a few people that maybe they're listening to the stream right now. They reach out and they say, "Hey, I want you two to come to my booth this year, check out what we have, mark all the no-nos that we've done, and then next year we're going to take all that feedback and we're going to do it the other way. We're going to try to build an authentic connection. We're going to use better messaging. We're going to really cut down on the buzzwords." And then ask them about the reactions from the
Mhm.
people that came to the booth, right? Did they have more meetings because they were more authentic and they spoke in clear English? Did they have more conversions because the people that came to the booth already knew exactly what they were looking for when they had that first conversation? And then when they had that conversation with the marketing person or the salesperson, whoever, that sales engineer behind the counter, they were genuinely interested in their problems. They were genuinely
Mhm.
interested in them, their company. I think that if you did a study like that and show like, hey, we took these 10 folks, these folks made these changes, and this was the tangible outcome from a revenue perspective, I bet you get a lot of people that are starting to change their tune about what messaging they use at events like Black Hat and RSA.
Point
Yeah,
me in
for
the
sure.
direction, point me in the direction to those 10 vendors,
Yeah,
and we're gonna do it.
yeah,
But again,
yeah, hit them up. Drop a message on to LinkedIn on LinkedIn to either Danny or George. I'm sure they'd love to do that type of research. So if you're a
Yeah, and
marketer or yeah, you're
I
putting that
want
stuff
I want to
together.
I also want to say we also have focused a lot on marketing here for the obvious reasons, but I don't know that buyers are necessarily off the hook, right? So
yeah.
Right.
I saw some conversations, I've been on the receiving end of some conversations where it feels like the buyer is asking you sort of gotcha questions. They're just kind of like drilling you, like, well, how does the AI work? How's the implementation work? What's your time? If you're asking those questions, you're incentivizing that kind of messaging and that behavior. And if you're reporting in the survey that you want to have these deeper discussions, I would encourage buyers to also approach the booths with that attitude and sort of like try to change the gravity of those interactions, because otherwise marketers are responding to what they perceive is the desire, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's hard. I wanted to give a shout out to one vendor that I saw doing really well, which was Tynes. They had a smaller booth in the hallway, and they had designed it in such a way as they had mostly conversations over the panel. And I overheard a buyer saying, like, I'm really interested, but I don't have, I want you to reach out in the next quarter, because that's when we're beginning to plan for this project. I thought that was a very forthright and candid conversation. Obviously I'm not on the back end. I don't know what kind of messaging, but my hope is that information would be relayed to the outreach. So it would be like, hey, thanks for stopping by. I see here that you want to discuss in the next quarter. I'll put on my calendar to reach back at, and just like acknowledge the dance. This is what we discussed. This is what you wanted. Is that right? Validate that. And then, you don't have to reach out, right? But it's that follow through from those candid conversations, and it's having those candid conversations in the first place about your budget, your timeline, and just be really upfront, and you'll probably get better results on the other side.
So let's start to bring it on home. I want to get to these questions because these questions are piling up, and we also have some great news for everybody out there that's in marketing or cybersecurity about Cyber Creator Con. But let's bring it on home. The tactical stuff that people can do, the strategic stuff that people can do. How do they grow from where they are today to be better, have those conversations, build those relationships, and market and sell without the buzzwords and BS? Let's start with you, George.
You need to have a really frank and collaborative discussion between marketing and sales. And sometimes they get along in an organization and sometimes they don't. But if marketing thinks they're bringing home the bacon because I spent this much and I got this many scans, and then those scans get handed off to BDRs or sales, and they're like, I only got like 2 meetings out of this because most of them were consultants and students, then you're always going to have that friction. You have to come together and be like, what is our intention with this event? Is it market feedback? Is it, and you can have a primary or a secondary goal. Come together. And if you optimize for meetings or pipeline, the way you approach those conversations and those qualifiers are going to be very different versus, if you have 2 different sets of metrics, it's highly problematic. You're always going to compete with one another.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. Having the conversation between those departments prior, aligning your KPIs, what you're expecting from there, so crucial. So crucial. It's going to make or break, I think, your event. And hopefully this report will give some evidence that will help that conversation, right? Okay, this is what we should be doing. This is what we could be doing differently. This is how we should be approaching prior to our event. This is our pre-event strategy, right? Which will help us be more successful at the event. I think that's key. I think that will change up the game for sure.
Fantastic.
And you're a military man, Chris. So the after action report, right? Like be critical. Like, here's the spreadsheet. We spent X amount of dollars on the event. This is the T&E for the employees. This is what we got out of it, or our perceived goals. What can we do better? Don't just assume like we did RSA last year, so we're doing it this year. And you just have to really have some hard critical thinking conversations. But we talked about pressure and time. I think that is a big piece. It's sort of like RSA is over, on to the next, on to Gartner, on to whatever. Yeah, you really have to, you have to build the time into the process to really evaluate it. Otherwise, you're just sort of iterating on the same mistakes over and over.
Feedback is a gift. You have to leverage it. Let's get to some questions. All right. Do you plan to do the same analysis at other conferences like that?
I'm still recovering from RSA, but I don't. This was a behemoth of a project, but I mean, I'm not against it. George, what do you say we make this a ritual?
Yeah, we could try to make that happen. Maybe Deb will help out. No, we need more volunteers. It's a lot of time.
Yeah,
it's a lot of time.
By the way, shout out to Katie, who actually helped us. She's one of my marketing gal who actually helped us capture all the data, put it all out in Excel, and then we all cut it. It was a lot of work, folks. This was a behemoth of a project for sure. But I'm not against doing this again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to help, definitely reach out to George and Dani. So if events, so are events even worth it? It's a good question at the end of the
Yeah.
day. Or would vendor budget be better off spent elsewhere?
I think events are totally worth it.
Mm.
I think fostering community engagement to support some of the smaller events, like B-sides could be great. Creating a safe space for buyer collaboration could really, really help come in and
Mm.
sponsor that, community for them, that experience for them. Super valuable. I think those large events could help you. They could help you if you approach it right. All right. If you're
Mm-hmm.
coming in, doing the work ahead of time, coming in and setting up those conversations with people that you built relationships with, making sure your calendar is fully booked with people that you know and that could potentially, become advocates for you or buyers, right? Or customers. I think that's definitely worth it, right? Just
Events are events are 100% worth it. It's just what you come to it with and what you want to take away. So for smaller startups, it might include, partnering with your channel partners or either other vendors to do some offsites, right? Because maybe you can't afford, $7 million booth. Who can? Um, and so maybe you have to play it tactically one year and another, but it's undeniable when you have a Black Hat, when you have a Gartner, when you have an RSA, how are you going to get that many security buyers in one physical location? You just have a huge concentration, and you can build those relationships that will allow you to do other things like maybe involve them when you're in their region, right? I mean, it pays dividends, but you really have to like map out what you're hoping to get out of it, which is going to be more than one thing. Because if you're like, I'm going to RSA for revenue, good luck. But
Mm-hmm.
you just have to like be really intentional about those goals.
Okay, one more up there. What about publishing a top 10 booze after the event? Provide some good publicity and reward good behavior. It's an interesting suggestion. What do y'all think?
I did this last year at Black Hat on LinkedIn though, but again, not against it. I don't know that I saw 10 that were exceptional.
Mm.
There were a few that I liked, but I think what we should do next time is survey folks to give us their vote. I
Yeah.
mean, me,
Ooh,
I'm
yeah.
I'm partial. I mean, I like people at the vendor booths, right? And I like their brand and I like the colors. Again, I'm not the right person, I think, to be surveying this. I have my opinions,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
That's a
think
good point.
the survey could be compelling, and that's something that we could do next time for sure.
Yeah, that might be a way to crowdsource a lot of the information. Have people call out what they like, what they don't like.
Yeah.
Why did they think this was like one of the top booths? And then provide a little incentive. Maybe there's something that you all could do for them for giving you all this information. I think that'd be really cool to see.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I want to be sure that people know where to get the report. What is the best way for people to get the report?
Yeah, I mean, I could link it into this session here. You can go
Yeah,
to
we have people on the link, but yeah.
yeah, I could go to audienceFirst.fm. I'll bring it up to the homepage so people can find it. It's deep in resources, so we'll bring it up to the homepage for folks. But yeah, and if you want to collab on this potentially with us, or if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You could do that through LinkedIn or through the website audiencefirst.fm.
Absolutely. And I have to give this special announcement. First heard for everyone that's on the stream today. One of our favorite relationships is with the Cyber Marketing Society, and they have their annual conference every year. And we've been a part of it every year since they started the Marketing Society. This year is going to be in Austin, Texas, December 10th through the 13th. And we're doing something really special on the Hacker Valley side. Embedded in the conference, we're having our own Cyber Creator Con, and it's going to be on December 11th. It's going to be down at the Marriott downtown in Austin. That whole day is going to be full with panels and speakers. We're going to have an opportunity for creators to collab with each other and create content. And also, I think this is one of the most special things that we're going to have is we're going to have a speed dating where we're going to match up these creators with marketing leaders there at the conference in a speed dating format where you can get to know each other, perhaps do some sponsorships, maybe even do some type of collaboration together. So if you are a cyber creator or someone who's even thinking about being a cyber creator, be sure to visit the Cyber Marketing Con website / Cyber Creator Con, and you'll be able to get your ticket there. If you're not able to make it there down to Austin, Texas, we are going to live stream it. So there is a virtual ticket as well. So if you are looking to create, you're looking to craft your messaging in a way that does resonate with folks, be sure to check us out, and we'd love to see you there. Dani and George, I just have to say thank you so much for all that you do for the community. I mean, this data first approach to marketing, I think, is something that we all need to see. I'd love to see that follow-up study where you take somebody that leveraged a bunch of buzzwords and then what that impact was after you did a little bit of massaging for that messaging. But I think everything that you're doing, everything that you continue to do is incredible for us. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to hop on the mics with us. Do you have one final word of advice or one thing that you want to say to everyone on the stream today? We'll start with you, Dani.
I'd say for the marketing and sales folks, don't be discouraged. Keep on it. Build those relationships with buyers. Lean in with curiosity. Ask for feedback and reach out if you have any questions.
Mm-hmm. George?
Yeah, be curious, be bold.
That's it. That's all you need. With that, be curious, be bold, and we will see everyone next time.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Audience First. If you like what you've heard, feel free to follow or subscribe to Audience First on Apple, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast streamers.